What else could you have imagined yourself becoming when you look back?
I mean, I think I always knew I was going to be a professor from a very early age. I mean, it seemed to be the consensus that I was going to be one. I suppose because I was talking in long words as a child. I think the only question I had as I grew up was what I'd be a professor in. I mean, it was always fairly clear that I was going to end up at a university. I always thought I would. And then I actually went to professional guidance and, to a vocational thing. And they told me psychology was clearly the best and economics was a second possibility, and that the dreams I'd had of being a physicist were just dreams. So that's.
What attracted you to the study of psychology?
Mainly philosophical problems. I mean, as a teenager, I was interested in all the standard philosophical questions that occupy teenagers, like why should we be good? Why should we not sin? Why is life the way it is? And I found, as a teenager, I found that I was actually more interested in my own thought processes and in the thought processes of others as I was dealing with these problems than I was with the problem themselves. So I'm more interested, and I was as a teenager, in indignation than in ethics, in a broad sense. That is, what is it that makes people, angry at other people for certain actions? And similar things, I think, with respect even to metaphysics. So clearly, I came to psychology as a way to do philosophy.
How did you meet Amos Tversky, and what were your first impressions of him?
Well, I met Amos the first time. I didn't actually meet him, I saw him. But it made an impression on me, so I remember that. Amos was an officer in the paratroopers in Israel, and there always was a kind of mystique to the paratroopers. And people with a sort of the red beret was, you looked at them.
How did you start collaborating?
That's quite a story. I was running a seminar at the time called Applying Psychology, which was, I wanted to distinguish that from applied psychology. The idea was applying the general principles of psychology to the everyday world. Again, you would know quite a few of the names of the people who took that seminar, like Tzur Shapira and Bar Fischoff. They were both in it. And Amos had come back from Michigan, and he was an expert on decision making and judgment under uncertainty. And so I made an exception to my usual rule of, that we're discussing applied problems, and I brought him to tell us, because I knew nothing about the topic, what was new in that field of application. And he came, and he described Ward Edwards' research paradigm, the book bag and poker chips paradigm. And I gave him a very hard time.
Why do you think that the collaboration was so magical? Why was it so successful? What unique strengths do you think each of you brought to the collaboration, and where do you think the synergies came from?
We were spending our lives together. Most of the working day, every day. We could finish each other's sentences, and we frequently did. It's not. But we also kept surprising each other. And the magic that developed was, I've always thought that what was happening was that we were quicker in understanding each other than in understanding ourselves. The way that the creative process works, and I think that's true for most people, is that you first say something. And later, sometimes years later, you understand what you said. And in our case, this was just always it was foreshortened, and that was the magic. So I would say something, and Amos would understand it and, elaborate on it, or he would say something, and it gives me goosebumps when I remember that. It was really quite extraordinary.
Obviously, the watershed moment was when you were awarded the Nobel Prize in economics. So what was your response, learning the news, and what surprises you about the ways that your life has changed since?
Well, it's obviously a joyous occasion. It's kind of a mixed bag because Amos wasn't there to get it with me, and in some sense, I think, well, there have been two things that I've been struck by, and the first one is that the source of pleasure and joy is entirely in the pleasure of others, which I had not realized. And that I realized the very first morning, and it was with me, during the period. I no longer think about it much, frankly, but during the first period, it was very salient. There was a press conference organized at Princeton, in the hall in which I teach, and there were lots of people, lots of colleagues and students, and they were beaming ear to ear, and that was a wonderful experience. I mean, just seeing people, so something good has happened to you, and people are enjoying it, and not only are they enjoying it, they're enjoying the fact that they're enjoying it, because it's a very pure experience to enjoy somebody else's pleasure. And so people feel good about you and about themselves. I mean, there's kind of a warmth to that, to that widespread pleasure. That clearly was the peak of my experiences in that domain.
What gives you special satisfaction and pleasure today in your career and in your life?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm still working. I don't think much about my life. I'm very much a day-to-day person. I don't have long-term plans, and I never really did either. And I'm not thinking in terms of my life as a monument of any kind. So on the day-to-day basis, I'm having a good time.
What questions do you find most interesting right now? What sort of goals do you have on the research front?
Well, I'm trying to understand well-being. It's a big enough problem to occupy me for the rest of my days, and so that's what I'm on to these days.
How has the study of well-being and decision-making influenced the kinds of decisions you make in your own life?
Some, not a lot, but yeah, some. I think that I have a perspective on what really matters to me that occasionally guides my choices. Not all the time, but occasionally some choices are guided by a broad view of what matters to me, and that was encouraged by the research. The one example that I remember where I really took action, it was guided by research, was buying furniture in the immediate context of buying a house. And that is very good advice. Don't wait until you start feeling poor before you start buying furniture. Buy the furniture, lump it together in one mental account. That was a fresh insight, when we bought a house in the late 70s, and that we applied that one, and I thought that was really clever. I had learned something.
Do you have any insight into the sources of your success as a researcher? Any particular traits, any particular actions you took, any luck play a role? To what extent?
Well, obviously, my choice of friends is the primary. I've been extraordinarily lucky. So I had one collaboration actually with Jack Beatty, who is at UCLA, which was the first time I found the joys of collaboration. Then I had Amos Tversky, which completely changed my life. Then I had, Dick Thaler, who is my best friend and a huge influence, a mutual influence, who also changed my life. I mean, the Nobel Prize is really due to Dick Thaler's activity, at least as much as to Amos and me. And I've been lucky afterwards with people. So it's clearly something that I've been enormously lucky in the people I've worked with. In recent years, it's been David Schkadek, Sunstein. So my collaborations have been the most wonderful things in my career. It really my research has been a social experience as well as an intellectual one, and it's been a glorious social experience.
One last question. What would you like to be remembered for? How would you like to be remembered? I never asked myself that question. The one thing that I'm sure of is that I'll be forgotten, and that's okay. Ultimately, we're all forgotten, and that's okay. So we have a life to live, and then, there are short-term things, and you hope that people will remember you fondly, but you assume they will. I have no worries on that score. And then, life will go on.